Get your copy of The Royal Mindset by using the link below. Hello and welcome back to another video. Today is a big day for me because I am unveiling the fully completed Royal Mindset right behind me there. It's now more or less complete. It's now available to buy. I'm still going to get some guys to read over it and edit it, give me some tips on maybe how I can edit it and stuff, but I don't want it to be perfect. I want it to be, my first book. I wanted to be available. I wanted to be out there. I'm really pleased, really happy with the process of writing it, really happy with the way I was able to dedicate time towards it and how I found it actually quite enjoyable and quite easy to fulfill the project. At the end of the day, it was really a project I set myself. Probably I had a vague idea of writing something like this about half a year ago, but it was really about May thereabouts where I really put a lot of effort into writing the actual script, the actual content. And yeah, now it is kind of complete. I mean, I say kind of because things, I think from a producer's point of view, like in music, you're never really 100% happy with anything that you make, but you're more or less pleased. And I am at this stage quite pleased with how the book is. I'm thinking when I look at it back in the future, yeah, I'll see mistakes in it and stuff, but it's my first book. I'm really just happy to have hit this milestone. It's a big deal for me. And I guess this video is just going to be the first video of a lot of videos where I'm going to talk about the topics in the book. So the book is available to buy for about €5 with the link in the description. But you don't really need to buy the book in the sense that I'll be talking about the topics here on the channel for free. But if you want a summary of all the points, the book's definitely a handy way to get them. And I do find I am a bit more, maybe even a lot more concise when I write rather than when I speak. But okay, let's start with today's, I suppose, summary of the book. I'm going to call this TRM 1 or the Royal Mindset 1 in the video, just to kind of, I suppose, have a guide for which videos are going to be about the Royal Mindset and which videos will be about other topics. So for today's, I suppose, topic in the book is just kind of describing the book as a whole, describing the general concept. And I've written down here, it's actually been kind of difficult to write down in a couple of lines what the entire book is about because it's got such a broad theme. But it is definitely a motivational book, a book that is designed to help myself as much as anybody else to kind of work out our priorities in life. So definitely, because it is called the Royal Mindset, which is a combination of my name, it is the way I think about things. So it definitely is a book for me as much as for anyone else, and I do see myself using this book in the future when I have doubts on certain topics, and then I can go back and realize I've actually thought about this really well, and I've already put a lot of research into certain avenues. So it is a product for myself as much as for anyone. So the overall book is basically describes how a perfect role model would live their life. I've called the role model the good king because in the book I describe how we live better lives than kings from hundreds of years ago, simply because of all the things we have access to, all of our autonomy, food supplies, running water, things like this that basically no king had access to, and yet we kind of enjoy living standards better than those kings. And therefore it kind of seemed logical to use a king as a role model, simply because we live lives as good as kings, and then how would this perfect king live their life? And this is kind of the perfect character that I've built in the book, kind of completely from scratch. Now it's a flawless character, it's not necessarily realistic, but it certainly is a great character that we can emulate in difficult or challenging situations, as well as day-to-day examples. This character is meant to be kind of flawless on all levels, from like his moral approaches, from his honor, from the way he treats people, the way he treats himself, the way he has his priorities in order, the way he's responsible, and the way he's able to do basically everything in the best possible way. Now, of course, nobody's ever going to be perfect, therefore even the character described will not be perfect and will not be perfect to everyone as they see it, but it's as perfect as I could make it in the book, and I think it's really a really cool concept to have a perfect character that we can emulate, that we can think of how would this character do this, how would the good king approach the situation. So rather than kind of holding yourself to a low standard, you hold yourself to the highest standard possible, imaginable. So that's basically the main concept of the book. So you have kind of a mini chapter system within the book. So there's chapters, and each chapter has got a mini chapter system. So there's golden pages, which describe how the good king would do something in kind of this perfect, almost unrealistic, almost romanticized kind of world. And then you have the blue lined chapters, so chapters that are lined with blue on top. So here's goals, just kind of yellow lines, very very small. And then hopefully I can find one quickly. Okay, this is obviously an older version, but basically you can imagine this line being blue instead for a practical approach. So the blue lines are kind of a more practical approach, a less kind of perfect, a less kind of pressurized situation where I'm describing how we as everyday people can kind of use these concepts and implement them in our own lives. The book is slightly orientated more towards men simply because I am a guy and it is my thoughts, but I do think a lot of the topics are kind of applicable to everybody. And I do kind of write with kind of the pronouns of him and an awful lot in the book simply because I'm a bit too lazy to go back and edit them. But I think I could have changed them. I could have made them applicable to everybody, for sure. And if you read the book with an open mind, I think you can really see that a lot of these topics are just kind of useful for everybody in general. So a big theme of the book is understanding or trying to prove and show to us and to myself and to everybody just how lucky we are to be alive. And this ties in really well with the idea that we live better lives than kings. I mean, when I look at like things like depression stats and this sort of thing, and even though I've never been depressed myself, I know lots of people who have gone through this kind of a cycle and a phase. I always thought if these people could kind of look at the world from a different perspective, even just for a short while, if they could put into their head this idea that say you picked a peasant from like 500 years ago and you swapped their life with your life now and you went back and lived the way they had to live, and then you came back to your normal life, you'd never be depressed again because you would realize all the privileges, all the great things we have in this life. The contrast would be so big and so mad that you would just think, wow, how was I depressed over this small little seemingly unimportant element of my life? And often these really are small things that kind of grow and grow in our brains and kind of become out of control. And if we kind of could appreciate the difference, the contrast in like how bad lives used to be, and even though then those lives weren't that bad, but like in comparison to what we have today, I mean, they were working all day in like fields and stuff, and they didn't have good food, and they didn't have good water, they didn't have like such a crazy amount of things for the average peasant back in the day. They lived less, they had more diseases, they were exposed to all sorts of kind of illnesses that we just have cured and eradicated at this stage. So there's just so many reasons why we should feel so privileged to live in this era. It is the golden age of humanity, and this is kind of the theme that the book tries to bring across. I do have a disclaimer at the very start of the book, which I should have. Oh yeah, here's an example of the blue colour, which will all be very apparent once you actually see the book for yourselves. Oh yeah, here. So, big long disclaimer, basically just saying that the following concepts are based on what we should and could be as people, and that they're purely presented as guides and as inspiration, and nothing is like, you have to do it this way and this is the only way you're going to be able to live. It's just kind of ideas to help open our minds. Theories and topics that have been of immense value to me, certainly. And just the way I think if we all work and we all have ambition and we all feel that we have a drive to better ourselves and we understand why, that this is really just the best way to live. You should always be getting a little bit better every day, not becoming less, or at the very least, maintaining yourself. You should be always kind of going up and up from like your education, from your health, from your fitness, a little tiny gradual growth. And I've talked before in a different video about how gradual growth is the most important thing that we can kind of strive for in our lives, because as humans we are kind of addicted to growth. We always want to see things going better and better, and if we can learn to just do it slowly, it's a very sustainable kind of a target and an ambition that we can have, rather than targeting extreme, colossal, like exponential growth and then crashing back down again almost imminently, almost directly thereafter. If we can kind of live in a life where we're getting every day a little bit better at a skill, or every day a little bit better at communicating, or something, anything within the human realm basically, then over a life you can look back and you can be very proud of yourself and probably very satisfied, because you can see how far you've come. I think this kind of way of thinking is perhaps not spoken about, and I do think as individuals this kind of continuous growth is probably the best way you can live. I don't have a lot of examples about this, but I think the basic theory makes a lot of sense. And this is kind of the whole book, just theories like this that I have, that I kind of been writing down. And when I look back on it, I'm really glad I did, because I would have forgotten a lot of stuff if I wouldn't have written them down. And I think I've written it in a way that is more or less quite easy to read. Certainly, My punctuation mightn't be 100% perfect across the entire book. Like sometimes I might have a sentence that's slightly too long, or I might have a comma here it mightn't belong. But other than that, I think there isn't anything kind of too difficult in there to read. I think it's more or less quite straightforward and intuitive, and I hope people will find it quite useful and quite easy to read, quite maybe even enjoyable to read parts of it, especially if they have a slightly similar mindset or they're starting to develop a mindset where they see everything as a challenge to improve. They see everything as kind of a part of life where you can get better. And I mean, this is the point of self-motivation books, books for self-improvement. This is kind of like a self-improvement book, I suppose, because you need to have kind of that mindset, that kind of be attacking life from that angle for it to be of real value to you. But even if it just kind of opens your mind to different things, then I think you're also going to get value from the book in essence. So yeah, that's about the general description of the book. A book where I describe a perfect role model that we can emulate, and then kind of going into topics about how you can live your life to the fullest in certain areas. A whole lot of different topics. I have the list here of the chapter contents. So basically, it's got 3 big main chapters. One is mindset, which I think is the most important thing. Mindset on all things is probably, like, without mindset you can't do anything. Like, if you have a negative mindset, everything's going to be terrible all the time. Like, if you've been spoiled all your life and you're given an amazing present, if your mindset's wrong, you don't care. Whereas if you're someone who's never had anything in their life, the tiniest present means the world to you. So mindset is just so important. Then health. Health is something that we're all born with. We all have health of the same standard, more or less, for most of us, unless you're born with some sort of an issue, but most people aren't. We all have the same amount of health, the same potential for health, more or less, from when we're born. And yet, half of America is becoming overweight. Half of the world will probably follow America from a population percentage point of view. So we all have the same potential, but then due to our life choices and the life choices perhaps of our parents mean that we end up in different places. And rather than blaming our parents for this, if you feel like you've been put in a position where you're in poor health because of the way your parents raised you, then it's all the more important to make sure you raise your kids properly. And therefore, understanding health is extremely important. And then the last thing is life setup. I couldn't think of a better name for this chapter. This chapter is kind of less important, but it's just the way I think about things like aging, or like priorities in life, friends, family, finances, that kind of thing. So it's more probably a lesser important chapter, but definitely still some very interesting topics. The book itself is probably about 20,000 words, so it's not super long, but it was long enough to write, and I'm quite pleased with the amount I've written. And I hope that I'll be able to make a video on every single chapter. It's just going to be a good opportunity for me to keep practicing speaking to the camera, to keep practicing becoming more, I suppose, concise when I'm speaking, and so on. So yeah, I hope you look forward to hearing more about these topics. Thanks for listening. Bye. Get your copy of The Royle Mindset by using the link below.